Welcome to another episode of Live from the Blue Seats. I'm your host, Rob, joined this week by Dave and producer JL, John-Luc Shapiro, who is coming to us live from the bowels of the oldest municipal building, maybe in the country, maybe in New Jersey. I don't know. We're going to look this up and clear it up, get some historical facts for you all. But JL is producing and will, share his 2 cents on some Rangers topics as he finishes up his day job, if you will. Over there in Perth Amboy. So obviously excited to do the pod this week because all good things to talk about. The Rangers are on a roll, 7-1-3 in their last 11 games. They are very much alive in what is a tightly packed Eastern Conference. I would say that not only are they alive in what is the wild card race, but things could get interesting if the Devils keep going the direction they're going, because it's not been an easy time for them over the last few weeks. So Dave, I'll start with you. How's it going in your neck of the woods?
So I'm good. I just got a weird message that my mic disconnected from my computer. So make sure I think it's still working, but
You sound good.
That's the most entertaining thing I've had in the last couple of days. Things are good. I am actually getting to watch some games now. The girls are finally, hopefully, and I'm going to jinx myself saying this, not giving us a hard time at bedtime. So I've been actually able to sit down and watch the last 2 periods of games, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. They have actually started to play like they should be playing. And it's nice. It's a refreshing change from the doom and gloom that we've had over the last, 8 weeks before this, half of November, all of December.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been good, and we'll talk about some of those general trends, and there's a ton of great questions to get to as well. So thank you everybody for, as always, for contributing and for listening. JL, does the building you're in have heat? Like, how are things going there at what is apparently the oldest municipal building
Does it have
in New Jersey?
Okay, actually, well, first of all, it's nice to be here. Thank you, everybody. Dave, no, I'm kidding. No, so Perth Amboy City Hall is the oldest municipal building still in use to this day. I'm not entirely sure if it's the oldest in the country, but it's one of the oldest in the country. And yes, there is air conditioning and also heat in the building. The only thing is that you can't automatically switch to it. You have to call a guy who lives like 2 doors next door and say, "Hey, man, can you fix this?" Okay, sure. So there's kind of like that line between towards the end of fall or end of spring going into summer where it's too cold or it's too hot. You know what I mean? So the building was absolutely scorching today. So it's gone through many changes, but it's a really nice building. And we also have a prison cell in the basement of this building.
Oh.
So yeah.
Is that where is that where they threw Matt Rempe after he got kicked out of that Devils game?
Oh my God.
You know what? If they might have actually, all things
Not that long
considered.
a ride from Newark. Yeah.
I don't know. Did people come in that size way back when they built this building?
True. He's
I
probably
don't-
larger than the cell.
Probably, I wouldn't think so. I think his hair probably is bigger than some of the spaces in this building, probably. So, but yeah.
Yeah, no, great to hear from you, JL. And yeah, Dave, like you said, I mean, just a complete 180 in terms of the vibes, which we always are very attuned to on this podcast, but also what we're seeing on the ice. And look, it's pretty well known. I'm not the biggest Joe Micheletti fan. He does not let you forget that, and he's not wrong, but it kind of annoys me the way he hammers you over the head with it every game. But look, this is very much tied to the way the Rangers defend. Even when they were going poorly, they still had a pretty good offense in terms of its underlying numbers and measurables. They could always create chances, but they would give up a ridiculous amount of scoring chances against. And that's really what was sinking them. You combine that with the turmoil around Truba and the uncertainty around Kako and Kreider, and obviously two of those three are no longer with the team. The new guys are settling in. JL and I talked a ton about Will Borgen last week, so we don't need to go down that path again. But certainly, Dave, I think I'd love to get your thoughts on the defense specifically, especially coming off of that Ottawa game on Tuesday night, which was probably their best defensive game all year and maybe in multiple years. Ottawa only had 20 shots. I think Steve Valiquette had them down for one high danger chance. He actually only counted 14 of those 20 shots as actual scoring chances in his, ClearSight analytics model. So that was a complete shutdown performance, probably the easiest shutout Igor Shesterkin will ever have.
So it's actually funny you say this because the Patreon post that I put up today was about the Keandre Miller, Will Borgen pairing and how that pair has completely changed the way the Rangers look defensively.
Mm-hmm.
That pair is a true shutdown pair. They are getting, I think it's 30% offensive zone starts. So that's not 70% defensive zone starts, but they very rarely start in the offensive zone. They're pushing play up the ice and finishing in the offensive zone, which is nice. They're getting top competition against them. They're still above 50% in both expected goal share and shot share. They're a little bit under 50% in high danger chance share, at least per natural stat trick. But that pair is an actual shutdown pair. And it's great to see Miller actually turning it around and looking good. Borgen has been solid. I'm okay eating my words on that Kako trade. Borgen's been solid. I don't think anybody would say anything different. But the key, and this is something that I don't think, Rob, you were on this one a couple weeks ago. JL and I were talking about Keandre Miller, and some of the hate that was thrown in his direction was unwarranted because in the system, the center needs to fill in behind in the high slot and in front of the net when Miller is doing what he's supposed to be doing, chasing the guy around. I'm not saying he was perfect, but there was some hate that was not deserved. And now we're seeing, if you watch that one, wherever the puck is, there's a Ranger in the high slot. There's a Ranger at the net mouth covering. And funny enough, that's what led to the Rempe backhand roofer.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Because they had four guys in the corner. Rempe knew he had to be that in the high slot. That's basically what a strong side overload would look like, is that you're outnumbering the opposition down low. Your goal is to get the puck out, but you have an outlet just in case to cover that pass to a high danger area. Rempe got the turnover, turned it with Edstrom, and we know how that ended. It's easy to focus on defense pairs, but when we take a step back and look at the system, it's always the center that needs to circle back and cover. And if the center's not available, another winger's got to do it. So everything is coming up Millhouse, and the Rangers are actually looking good right now. But, it's only been, 7-1-3. So what is that, 11 games?
Mm-hmm.
There's a long way to go. And the next couple of weeks will determine whether or not this is a blip or they finally woke up.
The other person that I think deserves some credit here is Mika Zibanejad, and that is, and I think completely on the defensive side of the puck. Now, look, at his age, and especially with the deployment he's getting, he may never return to the offensive heights that he reached 3, 4, 5 seasons ago, where he was hitting 90 points and 40-something goals. And I think one year he was on pace for maybe 50 goals. It was a shortened season. I think that COVID year, he had 41 goals in 70 games or whatever it was. So he maybe could have touched 50 if he got hot. That's probably not going to happen again, right? I think he's past his peak offensively, but he's certainly much more committed on the defensive side of the puck. And his underlying numbers are starting to creep back in the right direction. I think, Larry Brooks in his column after last night's game, which was just full of praise for the Rangers, rightly so. I believe he mentioned that line had I want to say it was an over 60 expected goal share, and they were mainly deployed against, the Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson line. And this is largely what I wanted the Rangers to do in the aftermath of last season against Florida, where, they were deploying Mika in more of a like an offense versus offense role. And all that did was it muted his offensive game. And as we know that, him and Kreider just got caved by Barkov, and they got caved by their Carolina matchup for the most part as well. Obviously the series ended up going the right way, so you don't really remember that. But, if he can, and this line with Riley Smith and Will Cooley, I mean, even Will Cooley said in his in an interview after practice on Wednesday, like, look, it's a new role. It's a lot more defensively oriented, right? So whereas on the third line, I think Laviolette was like, hey, you guys are getting the softer matchups. Go try to make plays and play offense. Now it's defense first. And I think that probably permeates through the entire team. But, Cooley said it's where everybody's thinking defense first. Obviously, Riley Smith's a highly experienced player. Mika Zibanejad, effort is really never in question with him. It's always like focus and determination, but I think effort is generally not a question with him. And certainly he's been much, much better the last 4 weeks, but specifically since that line has come together. So I think those two players, those, top of the roster players, right? Keandre Miller, very important player on this team, even though he's not on a big contract yet. And Mika Zibanejad, who is on a big contract, is the nominal number one center, playing like a guy who sure might not score number one center like numbers, but can he be, as I've always said, like this team's Philip Dano, this team's, insert elite Anthony Cirelli, right? Insert elite shutdown center here. If Zibanejad is that, and you break up him and Kreider's more in a scoring role, and they're both still on the power play, to me, that's this team's best way forward. So those two guys, to me, Keandre and Zibanejad, are huge keys to the turnaround. JL, anything from your perspective that stands out outside of those two?
Well, and I apologize in advance. I'm driving home now. I'm obeying all the laws though. But okay. I'll say this. You pretty much hit it on the head with those two. But also, I want to point out, I mentioned this the last podcast, but I think a lot of what's kind of helped them out too was also just honestly the steadiness of Urho Vakanainen. He's kind of, I guess, falling through the cracks a little bit because he's not as flashy. But if you watch him play, he's just as steady as you can get. And I think what ended up happening is I think they needed some sort of turnover on defense, obviously because Trouba wasn't working out. But obviously you praise Will Borgen, and obviously Kreider, or rather Zibanejad and Cooley and Miller have really panned out. But give Urho Vakanainen a lot of credit. He came aboard and immediately there was this sort of like steady presence on the back end. The thing with Trouba, and I probably said this last week too, but the thing with Trouba is that it just kind of seemed very unsure. Nobody seems unsure in the back end. And you talk about, everybody focusing on defense. That couldn't be any closer to the truth because they seemed a little bit more vigilant in their own zone. They seem to be taking better routes to pucks, better passes. They're not doing things carelessly. They're not trying to do too much, although there were a few instances in the Ottawa game where I think they kind of overpassed a little too much, but that's going to happen in an NHL game, every so often. But ultimately, just from the Ottawa game, which I was awesome to be at, by the way, you could just see that they're gelling together. And, I like pointing out Vakanainen because they always say that the best defenseman is the one you don't notice. And yeah, Borgen has been able to play well with Miller. Miller's a little bit flashier, but you can just kind of see that they're not as clueless in terms of just where they're at. And I know Dave does a good job of pointing out the systems and how some of the players react to it. But all in all, and look, I'll say this about Ottawa. They're not the greatest team in the world, but they're not the worst either. This Senators team kept the Devils to 1 goal, and the Devils are an offensive juggernaut regardless of their defensive responsibilities or defensive lack of defensive responsibilities rather, and they kept them to 1 goal. So it was just nice to see. And yeah, you're correct on the assessment with Valaket. Basically, they only really had 1 high danger chance. So they're buying into it now, which is nice because they're finally actually listening to the message, and they kind of got over their little hissy fit. So it's really nice. It's really nice to see.
Yeah. So I want to throw some numbers out at you, JL. The Vakanainen and Schneider pairing is the current best pair in terms of high danger chance share at 54.55%. So they're doing their job. They allow 2.3 expected goals per 60, which is, again, tops for the current pairs. Their expected goal share is 46%, but that's mostly because they're not really generating anything offensively. In terms of shot share, they are a little weaker, but that's not something I'm concerned about because they're not allowing high quality chances. So like you said, that pair is sneaky under the radar, pretty good. That's a solid third pair. They're limiting high danger chances against, even if they're not, above 50% in overall shot share. That's what you want.
Right, and
Yeah.
I'll mention this too briefly. Sorry, I just wanted to get this out. Just all the stuff that you mentioned, you can just also tell, and maybe this is probably with the exodus of a Kako and a Truba. Maybe they were the problems. I'm not going to say that they were the problem because obviously there was a lot more going on, but you can just kind of tell that they look relaxed, and it just from the attitude of the players, the way that they're skating, the way that they move the puck in and out of the zone. Before there seemed to kind of be this sort of like hesitancy of, I want to be the guy that tries to make the difference on the back end. But I think after a while, and you can really pinpoint, like I think you said, Rob, in one podcast before, that you can pretty much see after the Devils game at the end of December that they just kind of said, you know what, enough is enough. They stopped trying to do way too much. They kind of stopped gripping their sticks a little too hard and said, you know what, we're just gonna play. I hate to bring up another sport, but it's very similar to, at least the shift change was very similar to the 2024 Mets. Towards the end of the May, when they called up Iglesias and JD Martinez and Francisco Lindor had the team meeting, and they basically said, guys, listen, let's just go out there, have fun, play ball. And it turns out they were 2 wins away from a pennant. So I kind of see something similar going on here where they just said, you know what, you get to the point where you just have to just kind of just flip a switch at some point. And you can kind of tell they look more relaxed moving the puck on the back end. They're not trying to do too much. They're a lot steadier with the puck. They're making the simple plays. And then when they're in the offensive zone, if they can't make it, you see them bail out, and it ends up working out a lot better. Before, for example, I think there was if I can recall, there was a forecheck down in the corner when I was watching, and I think Zibanejad was on the ice. And much credit to him. I know I've been very hard on him, but I do know that Zibanejad has been nothing but exceptional in this stretch. And even though, like you said, Rob, he's not going to be the same guy as he was before, any production out of him is a plus because he still has a lot of talent. But the one thing I noticed, and Trocheck does this, and I know Carrick does this, and I've seen it more often during this streak, is that whenever there is a forecheck into the corner and it almost appears that they're going to lose the battle, the center just leaves and just kind of backtracks a little bit further out towards the blue line. So what that ends up doing is, he ends up being able to cover that pass out. And I've noticed a lot more interceptions on the blue line too. And Zibanejad has been very good at that when it comes to skating backwards, reading the play, and kind of having the time and whether he's going to either go back to the neutral zone or he's going to stay on and intercept the puck. And it's actually resulted in a lot of turnovers at the blue line, which have resulted in goals, including a few last night, or at least against Ottawa, because this will be, the night that they're playing the Flyers. So, it's definitely more cohesive.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there's a lot of things that are going right now, and obviously the winning is going to relax everybody. I will say, I think, Dave, we all, everybody, I think on this podcast, I would say in our sort of orbit, I think we all deserve a little bit of credit for not jumping ship on Laviolette as well. And I'm looking also in contrast at the Bruins, right, who fired their coach, got the bump, right? They kind of had, I think after they fired Jim Montgomery, I think they won like 6 out of 7 or 8 out of 10, whatever it was. But now they're 3-5-2 in their last 10. They're still mired in the, in the same sort of pack of teams as the Rangers are. And I'll be honest, I like the Rangers' chances much better than the Bruins of making the playoffs, considering, the state of things with both teams, right? The roster, the coaching. Meanwhile, like Jim Montgomery gets a job 2 minutes after he's fired, and his St. Louis team is like, is in a decent spot after a pretty rough start for them. So I think sticking by Laviolette was the right move. And I think his experience, frankly, was exactly what the team needed, right? He wasn't going to panic. Of course, you make lineup decisions. Guys got scratched that definitely deserve to get scratched. You got to try different things when you're going through an epic losing streak like they were. But now it's very much like, all right, we'll go back to the 1-3-1. Everybody was comfortable with that last year. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to some semblance of our original opening night lines. Although the breaking up Kreider and Zibanejad, I think, is very meaningful and important, right? As kind of like not only functionally on the ice, but also as a signal like, hey, we're not sticking with the thing that we know doesn't work. And then, of course, the improved defensive personnel, makes things a lot easier on the coach as well. So that's all good stuff. All right. So there's one other thing, and I realize I'm probably going to be like touching the third rail here. So it is what it is, but that's the whole point of a podcast, right? I posted something on Blue Sky last night, so I want to read it to you guys. This is Tuesday night after the game. I'll read it to you guys verbatim. I want to get your reactions, and then we'll talk a little JT Miller, because we have to. Here's my post. I want to hear what you guys, just give me your reactions to this if you didn't see it already. It's much easier to be a Ranger fan if you just give in to the Rempe thing. Dave, what's your thoughts on that? I want to hear your thoughts before I explain myself.
So give in to the Rempe thing. I'm assuming you mean just let him play. And
so it's open for interpretation. It's like a good song. So how do you go ahead? Yeah.
All right. So I understand that what I've been saying can come off as anti-Rempe, and I'm not anti-Rempe. I'm anti-Rempe's usage. I hate that he became a sideshow. I hate that he's not trusted, because when he's allowed to play the game and when he keeps his elbow down, a lot of this is self-inflicted. But when he's allowed to do what he does, we get games like, this is recording on Wednesday, so I'm going to say last night, against Ottawa, where he was very good. He was a difference maker last night against Ottawa. But when he becomes a sideshow, he plays 3 minutes a night, he gets ejected, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We know what happens. If Peter Laviolette accepts that Rempe can actually play this fun little game of hockey, then yeah, the Rangers are much more fun and a better team. I agree with you.
JL. I know you agree with it. Well, sort of. But give me your reaction to that.
It's easier to be a Ranger fan if you just give in to the Rempe thing. Absolutely. I mean, fans have rooted for players who have done worse. At least I'm speaking strictly on ice. He's not a vicious kid. Obviously he needs to be better with his elbow. But I mean, you look at a lot of the fourth liners the team has had over the last couple of years, and I think the only one that could probably really maybe get even close to that is Tyler Mott, because he came back the second time and scored that one goal in the playoffs that seemingly a lot of people seem to obsess over, which is cool because I thought it was a nice goal. But yeah, I just never understood the vitriol towards him. It just kind of seems a bit unwarranted. I could understand if, let's say, he was out here just absolutely just killing people with malice, elbows up all the time, on intentional, this and that and the fourth. It's like you can tell the difference between someone having a mean streak like a Tom Wilson or a Brad Marchand, than like Rempe when he's just kind of like a golden retriever. The kid has some semblance of skill. He's not the worst fourth liner in the world. The team seems to adore the kid because for some reason, every time he's here, good things happen outside of the self-inflicted things. You notice that? It's not.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to say it. I don't want to say it's. I don't want to say it's too much of a coincidence, but I mean, they call him back up. Yeah, they probably did win when he was in Hartford, but I mean, he comes up here. He plays a strong game like he did the other night against Ottawa, and the players just love him. I feel like you need something like that on a team like this because they kind of loosen up. So yeah, I think it's way easier to just kind of, I don't say give in, but just embrace it. He's on your team. You know,
Right.
it was you could say the same thing about Truba when he was sort of like an effective captain before he kind of gave up. It's like, yeah, he's not the greatest he wasn't the greatest defenseman in the world, but at least when he was still doing it, he was still a leader on the team. So yeah, you just have to limit his usage. Like, you know, and the same thing with Rempe is just how you use him. It sucks that he became a sideshow, but I mean, the kid's still young. Write him out. And I'll end with this, at least with this. I always say that every Stanley Cup winning team that I've seen has always had some semblance of a fourth or third line that's like homegrown, kind of those guys that you call up and just sort of like come out of your farm. Like you look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, you look at the Boston Bruins, maybe the Chicago Blackhawks. You had a lot of guys who were homegrown, and the Rangers figured that out because paying guys like that on the market, like Barclay Goodrow, before the Rangers really leaned into that philosophy, you know, it hurt them. Yeah, was Goodrow good here? You know, did he do what he needed to do? Yeah, he was not stellar, but he was overpaid. So you're going to get mad at a guy who can bring some energy to a team that everybody likes and the team is winning. I mean, pick a better battle. You know, I give into the Rempe thing, embrace it. And until he actually murders someone on the ice, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, and I'm not excusing any of the really bad stuff he did because there were a couple of just quite egregious hits that were rightfully suspended. Um, I don't think he was doing them with any intent at all, but I do think that he was doing what he thought would keep him in the league, right? So that's why he fought everybody his first 2 weeks in the league last year. I think he felt, again, to sort of justify his place on the team, he had to like throw at least one massive hit every game. And I think he's realizing now he doesn't need to do that. Look, the reason I posted that was like it was a little bit out of like, all right, let's, you know, tweak the my small following here on Blue Sky, see what people say. Um, but I think it's fair to say that like, and kind of in line with what you were saying, JL, like, I think it's just indisputable that he fits on the team. Now, he doesn't need to play every game. I think there's going to be times late in the season or if they make the playoffs, right? Especially if they round out the depth with trades, they have a ton of cap space. Like, look, if they add a forward, Arthur Kaliev might lose his spot. Rempe might lose a spot. Jimmy Vesey's been scratched. Johnny Brodzinski is a solid, you know, 12th, 13th forward, right? So like they actually are pretty deep at that on that part of their roster. But he just fits on the team. And I think the guy totally they like having him around. And it does bring a certain sense of like completeness to the picture. And that fourth line of him, Carrick, and Edstrom can be really effective. I also think that, um, you know, the way Carrick has elevated his game, I mean, that's probably the sole reason the fourth line's been so effective and productive. Carrick's just been an animal. He's been awesome. He's got 10 assists. He's up to 10 assists this year, which is fantastic. You know, Edstrom is essentially you know, a more polished version of Rempe with the size and the speed anyway. So, but you know, look, I think that there's my opinion is that he does have value. And I think when he's trying to make hockey plays and keeping his elbows down, as we've said, there is a place for him on the team. Again, not every single game. I'm sure he'll be a healthy scratch again at some point, but I do think that at this point, him going down to Hartford for an extended period of time, like we're past that. That's not going to happen. I think he is and should be with the Rangers for the rest of the season. All right. Let's do, well, first of all, Dave, you have the questions in front of you. Let me ask you, do we have anything in there about JT Miller and should we just cover it there? Or should we each give our, you know, quick, you know, 30-second reaction to all the JT Miller scuttlebutt?
So there is a question related to it. It wasn't part of the call for questions. It was related to a prediction I put on Blue Sky that
Okay.
somebody replied what my reaction to their my trade deadline prediction would be.
Okay.
I don't know if that counts. So
yeah, let's start there. Why don't we do, because that also covers the sort of the most recent proposed trade, right? So you can give everybody that background, and then we could kind of give our own reactions to, you know, if that were reality.
All right. So my prediction for the trade deadline right now is the rumored JT Miller deal eventually goes down. That price tag was Ryan Lindgren, Philip Hedl, two prospects, but prospects are two of Adam Sikora, Yaroslav
Shmelaj,
help
right? Shmelaj, yeah, something like that.
that
It's like
him.
Shemlach or something like that.
Yeah, that him or Bo Gralix,
I think it's just
whatever.
Gruel. That's just
Bo
Gruel.
Gruel,
Gruel?
Dave. Bo Gruel.
X,
Yes,
the X. Who puts a
Like
silent
Giroux.
X?
Giroux.
he's French, Dave.
Yeah, like Giroux.
Oh, give me whatever. All right, this is why you can't have me read these questions. And a first round pick, but I think eventually that does become a protected first round pick. All that for JT Miller. I think that trade eventually happens, and then I think the Rangers do go out and get a defenseman, a Jake Wallman type, or in this case, Jake Wallman, in a package that includes Zach Jones and some combination of prospects and picks that they've recouped. So that's in Miller and Wallman, out Lindgren, Hedel, bunch of prospects, first round pick. My reaction. So Danny at cutesy monster Dan.bluesky.social asked, what would my reaction to that prediction be? I don't like trading Hedel for a 32-year-old center with noted attitude issues that will be burning bridges with his third team, Rangers, Tampa, now Vancouver, and who may already be showing signs of decline. I don't like it. But you can't argue that as of right now, this year and next, Miller is an upgrade on Hedel. You can't argue that.
Mm-hmm.
Lindgren is a net negative. Getting rid of him, replacing with Wallman is a huge step forward. I don't like trading Hedel. I think it's a dumb idea to trade him for a 32-year-old center. But you can't argue the Rangers would be better with those deals. You can't argue it. They'd be better.
Yeah. So I'm on the record as wanting this team to do something that would bring a different attitude to the team. And that certainly accomplishes a JT Miller trade would certainly accomplish that. But obviously you want to be mindful of the cost and then the reality of, okay, once the initial high of trading for him wears off, because I think it would be very exciting and a lot, look, nostalgia is a real thing. A lot of people remember him. He came up a Ranger. He was a guy that we were all, very upset about being scratched, right, by Alain Vigneault early in his career. We wanted him to play more. And then when he did play in the 2015 playoffs, he was really good in a lot of the games that he was able to get into. So there is some nostalgia there. And then he did become, at his heights, kind of similar to Mika Zibanejad, right? In his late 20s, mid to late 20s, he had a 103-point year. He had a 99-point season. He became an elite number one center. And so there's that, right? You're kind of like, all right, if you could have him, Trocheck, and Zibanejad on the team together for at least the remainder of this season, if you're in a playoff spot and you get into the playoffs, like that is a team that is potentially very dangerous. Now, like, do they have an actual elite 1C, the likes of which can go up against Barkov, Sidney Crosby, Jack Eichel, Connor McDavid in those potentially in a Stanley Cup final? Like, no, probably not. They're, obviously like they don't match up against those guys, at least on a 1-to-1 basis, but the center depth is key. We always talk about that being a huge key to a Stanley Cup contender. It's hard for me to say no to that, especially given Hedel's injury history. But like I said, once the initial excitement wears off, you're looking at Miller's age. He turns 32 in March. The remainder of his contract, which is essentially the Zibanejad contract, 5 more years at $8 million per season. Even with the cap going up, you're not going to be able to keep both him and Zibanejad. So what are you doing there? They would both have no move clauses. Are you then getting rid of Trocheck? That wouldn't make any sense. He basically feels like the de facto captain of the team at this point. So it leaves you in a very weird position. And I almost am starting to wonder if the Canucks are continuing to drag the Rangers to the table just to get better offers from the other suitors out there, whether that's Dallas, New Jersey, Carolina. I mean, I'll also say this, and this tells you something, right? I would absolutely hate if he went to Carolina. I would absolutely hate if he went to the Devils. So that does tell you that he is still a quality player because I think he makes both of those teams better. but I agree it would be a lot to give up, and it's really something that I'm very much on the fence about.
Yeah, and just to add, because I'm looking at Twitter right now, this is from LGR 1989 at Get Team 2018, and he just asks about, basically the same thing about bringing JT back, and he asks if this will get us further in the playoffs, depending, of course, who we give up Rim. So I guess that's kind of in the same vein in terms of what we're talking about, but I'm in a similar feeling there, Rob, because I love Filipino. I have this thing, and I'm sure all of us have done this at some point, where I don't want to say grown attached to a player, but if there's like a player that you like that you see come up and you kind of seen them since the beginning, they come up and you see them thrive. Filipino was that guy for me because when they were going through that little mini sort of like sending off assets to start the 2017 season after the playoff run when they traded Stepan and drafted Anderson that year. They also had Filipino with, I think, the 21st overall pick. And you looked at both Anderson and Heedle, and Heedle was obviously the one with more skill. You look at his, World Junior championship games, and he just looked great. And obviously, it took a little bit of time for him to figure it out, but it seems like there's something there. And you could even look at I say yesterday. Look at Tuesday's game against Ottawa, where he had a couple of really nice rushes down the middle, and there was one that resulted in a power play when he was cutting to the net. Put a move or two on one of the defensemen and he tripped, but he was about a couple inches from having it go in, but he hit the post.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done that a lot more as of late, and he's on a cheaper deal. So I don't really want to see him go. He's got good underlying numbers when he's able to do it. He's as much of a playmaker as you can think of. But then at the same time, though, you also mentioned his injury history, and when he's gone, it really does debilitate this team. And I hate to say that, but it's just, Trocheck's fine in his role with Lafreniere and Panarin. And obviously Zibanejad is basically doing his Philip Deneau impression, which is fine. But you need a guy to drive play up the middle, and that's what Heedle does. But the thing is, if he's not there, then how can you really trust him? So I'm in a similar predicament where I'm on the fence about it. And there's also, I don't want to harp on the whole clubhouse issue things because most of those guys generally just like each other because they all come from the same cut of cloth. And I'm sure Trocheck and Miller are friends because they all grew up in the same neighborhood in Pittsburgh.
They are good friends, actually. There's a real connection there. Yeah.
So that could possibly help. I'm sure a lot of those clubhouse stuff was overblown. The media in Vancouver is not exactly the most reliable. We made a good comparison about the media in Canada in the chat. We basically said that the Toronto media is just whiny, while the Vancouver media is just like kind of spiteful. And we've seen that in terms of historical context with Bure, McGillney, even Linden, Messier to a degree. But then at the same time, you look
Messier earned that one. Messier earned that one.
Well, no, he did. No. I'm not saying it wasn't earned, but they definitely did lay into him for sure. But you look at sort of what happened with Miller in Tampa Bay. He couldn't figure it out as much there, playing with guys like Kucherov and Stamkos. It took him to get traded 3 times. And maybe he's better off now. Maybe he's a little bit more mature because there was a lot of reports going around that Miller was very immature with the Rangers. And, I think Jimmy Vesey and Kevin Hayes were also in a similar predicament where they were very immature and did not exactly live up to their, quote unquote projected standards, especially Kevin Hayes. But maybe Miller has matured. Maybe he's, not as, sort of abrasive as he once was when he was here the first time. He's even admitted that himself. There was an interview, I think it was either with The Athletic or the Players Tribune. I forget which one that it was for. But basically, he admitted that the trade from the Rangers was kind of a wake-up call. Granted, it's arguably not a great trade anymore. I thought it was a decent trade at the time, but basically nothing panned out from that trade for the most part for the Rangers, like with the exception of just getting rid of money. But if it happens, right, will I be sad Philip Heedle's getting traded? Yes. It'll make it a little bit easier now that he's in the West Coast if it happens. But at the same time, it's like I'm not going to sit here and lose my mind that we have JT Miller because he is at least still serviceable, center that could, I think the term that Suit likes to use in the chat is piss and vinegar. And I think that's something that the team could really use. And you said it right. And this is how I kind of feel is that you need a JT Miller type. It doesn't exactly have to be JT Miller itself, like, you alluded to in the chat, Dave. But if it happens and Chris Drury makes it so, going to root for the guy. I'm like 50-50 on it, but it would be kind of sad to see Heedle go. But if it results into, maybe a year or two of, decent runs, sure. Because I really think the Miller contract would probably be a lot easier to move than the Zibanejad contract, or maybe vice versa. Who knows? But one of those contracts definitely going to get moved if it happens.
Yeah. Although
So-
I'll say, yeah. All right, go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
Two things. One, if you're making that trade, it's not a couple of runs. You need a Stanley Cup, period.
100%. That's exactly what I was-
100%. Yeah.
No, it has to result in a Stanley Cup, or else it's a
It-
huge failure.
Yes, it cannot be out in the conference final. It cannot be out losing in the Stanley Cup final. You must win a cup if you're trading Heedle for Miller, period.
They've
The
had
second
runs
thing-
too. Like no one would be happy with runs at this point. Like this is all
Yeah.
about winning the cup now. They've had runs. We've experienced many runs. They've been great runs, but no, I agree. And I was just going to say, and then I'll get back to you, Dave. Like this feels like it kind of has to happen this year because as we keep saying, like, can they really keep him and Zibanejad beyond this year? Probably not. So it's like, are you really trading Heedle for one chance with a loaded roster and the loaded piece is JT Miller? It's a huge risk. So sorry, back to you, Dave.
So I'm looking at Philip Heedle's game logs and stats, excluding last year where he played 10 games. The fewest number of games he played was in 2020, 2021, where he played 42 out of 56 games. That was also the COVID season. 2019, 2020, another COVID season. The Rangers played 70 games. He played 60. Aside from that, we have 67 games in 21-22, 74 in 22-23, 75 in 18-19, and 38 out of 47 so far this season. And most of those were precautionary, not concussion related. There's some kind of, I think we spoke about this where we compared it to the Sidney Crosby thing where after his massive concussion, he had a lot of like soft tissue neck kind of things that weren't concussions, but obviously not as a neck thing, not a head thing, but they still held him out for precautionary reasons. And I'm not saying Heedle's Crosby, so miss me with that shit if somebody wants to get mad at me for that.
Right, but it's a useful comparison with the injuries for sure.
So my point here is last season is fresh in everybody's mind. And yes, he does have a concussion history. But he's not like he's missing full seasons aside from last year. He's missing 10 games, which can happen to anybody. You get a sprained ankle, you're missing 10 games. A sprained knee, you're missing 10 games. This is stuff that happens to NHL players. This injury history, yes, last year was brutal. I think it's mildly overblown.
Yeah, I mean it's a fair point. It's just what I'm looking at is so fine. Those games played totals are what they are. He's got 162 points in 375 games. Again, no power play time.
Yeah.
We know that's just he's entrenched behind some very highly skilled players, even with the power play not functioning at its highest level. He's still behind Lafreniere on the depth chart there. Like there's not a lot of opportunity for him. Although again, if they trade for JT Miller, like, aren't you going to put him on the power play? You're going to make him, you're not going to give it. So I don't know how much that really augments the team. But look, and the other thing is Heedle's only 25 years old. He's on a really reasonable deal. I would like to see him pick up his scoring pace. If he's on what is nominally their second scoring line right now, if you really think about what they have, right? The Rangers have a top scoring line with Panarin, Trocheck, Laugh. They have a shutdown line with Zibanejad, Cooley, and Smith. Their secondary scoring line is really Heedle, Kreider, and Kaliev. That line's got to put some pucks in the net. Like Heedle has 18 points in 38 games. Yes, he worked his way back from an injury or a layoff, precautionary layoff. he didn't look right the first 4 or 5 games back. He's looking better lately. To your point, JL made some dynamic plays in the Ottawa game. I really want to see him pick up the pace scoring wise, because other than that, I'm seeing a 45-point season in 22-23, and that's it. Other than that, his career high is 23 points. So,
Yep.
and JT Miller's is 103. So that's a pretty big difference.
Yes, like the Rangers would be better with Miller. I don't think anybody would question that. It's for how long is
Mhm.
the question I have, and that when you get Miller, Zibanejad's contract is still there. So
Yep.
what are you doing with it?
100%. All right, let's get to the other questions. We have quite a few.
Yep.
And we'll go rapid fire through them as we're at about 45 minutes here. So, yeah,
All
let's
right.
do it.
I have them up. So the first one is a two-parter. One is a statement. One is a question from our own Tyler McGillick, who is on Blue Sky at Tyler Richard 93.bluesky.social. The first statement: today, 11 years ago, the Rangers traded Michael Del Zotto for Kevin Klein.
What a trade. Loved Kevin Klein.
Yeah,
Oh, loved Kleiner.
I love
Oh, yeah.
Kevin Klein.
Talk about it. Well, he might have been their last solid, like, stay at home, I don't notice this guy at all defenseman. JL, to your point about Vakanainen, very Kevin Kleinish, different style of play, but same kind of output.
Right. He also had a hell of a shot that was very
He
underrated.
did.
He
Scored some OT
only
goals.
scored game-winning goals.
Yes.
Which,
yes.
hey, listen, fine with me. Hey, I'm good with that.
All right. So the actual question is related to JT Miller, but a different type of question. Tyler says, I want to preface this by saying I think acquiring JT Miller is a bad idea in asset management, mix of locker room type, that kind of a thing. But if we are absolutely in on JT Miller, what is the best package that you would offer that does not mortgage the future?
I would give them basically anything they want out of the prospect pool outside of Perot. So yes, I'd give them Othman. I'd even give them Berard probably. They could have Zach Jones. He's clearly has no future here. If it has to be someone off the roster, well, Zach Jones would be off the roster. If they wanted a forward off the roster, man, I don't know. Like
A forward
Cooley's
off the
an absolute
roster is
no,
tough. A
obviously. Yeah,
forward off the
you almost
roster is
can't
tough.
do it, right? Right. Heal's really the only one that fits, and I'm very on the fence about including Heal in the deal. I don't mind Lindgren coming off the roster, obviously, and my initial reaction when the most recent version of the trade leaked was, hey, if it gets Lindgren off the team, like, I'm for it, let's do it. But obviously, upon more thought, you're still like really making a hugely risky move getting rid of Heedle in that same deal. So it's something that's more prospect based, I guess. And then you just throw Zach Jones and or Lindgren off the roster and a couple more picks.
Yeah, it would be easier if Vancouver was I guess you can say, kind of out of it. They're basically in the same position as the Rangers. I think both have, at the time of this recording, I think both teams have about 50 points in the standings. So they're definitely going to want someone that can make an immediate impact. So it's definitely hard to come up with a deal without Philip Hedl. But in the case that Vancouver, let's say, or maybe even by the deadline, Vancouver's out of it and it becomes a very prospect heavy sort of deal. Yeah, I'd include Brennan Othman in there because this team has such a dearth of winger, or just like a plethora of wingers, that they can kind of afford to do that. And it would probably be, a mix of maybe Othman. I wouldn't say Berard, but that probably would have to be the case if that were to happen, because he does show a lot of signs of promise in the NHL. And then, maybe some of the Hartford guys like Hemlash. I got to find a better way to say it. And maybe Adam Sikora, probably, and a couple of picks. So if it were to be like prospect laden, that is ideally what they could do. But if they're going to get an immediate impact, yeah, Heedle's going to have to be a part of it. And if you're exercising Lindgren, I mean, that's a plus, because then you throw Zach Jones back in there, and have Ruedel as your 7th D. So yeah, it has to pretty much be either Heedle, or if it's a prospect laden trade, Othman, Sikora, probably Berard, another lower rung prospect, and like a first and maybe like a second or like a late round pick, probably.
So the one thing that we're missing here is if it's the Rangers, Miller is forcing his way here.
Right.
And all of that is not necessary. If it's the Rangers, and this is one of those weird things where somebody kind of fed me some interesting info once that trades like these, and let's be real, this is very similar to the Patrick Kane situation.
I was just about
Trades
to say
like
that.
these are tough on the NHL. And the NHL does every now and then not step in. And this is rumor. This is not confirmed, and nobody will ever confirm this. But every now and then you'll see something like you can't just give them a 7th round pick. You got to give them something so they save face.
Mm-hmm.
And it checks out. You don't want Patrick Kane being traded for a 7th round pick. You don't want JT Miller forcing his way to the Rangers for what amounts to Zach Jones and a 2nd round pick. Like, you can't have that. And I get it. But there is still leverage that Chris Drury has. I don't like the idea of including Hedel. I'm very adamant about that. I would include one of Edstrom or Rempe, either one.
Mm-hmm.
I would include Zach Jones, obviously. And because you need quality there, that's where you throw in an Othman and a 1st round pick. But that's it. I am biased because I don't want JT Miller. I think there are better options than a 32-year-old center.
All right. Next one.
All right, next one. Quick and easy. Bill to Spill at billtospill.bluesky.social. Probably one of the best and underrated follows you can have on any Ranger social media. Will Borgen, extend or trade?
I'm extending, and I'm telling you why. It's not going to cost him that much money. Cap's going up. He doesn't score. I know there's value there because he's a big right shot defenseman, and he does have, at least as a Ranger now, probably pretty decent underlying numbers. As I told you when they acquired him a few weeks ago, yes, he had a rough year and a half or so in Seattle, but before that, his underlying numbers were not bad. I know that one chart went around that said he was 2nd percentile worst defenseman on the face of planet Earth. He's really not. I would extend him for like 3 years, $3.5 million a year, and just call it a day. And you're getting a shutdown defenseman. I know what he could fetch at the deadline, but this season is trending more and more towards we're not selling. We're fine with our assets, and we're keeping Will Borgen, who is, 28 years old? He's right at the perfect age to be extended for 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You keep him. He's been very steady. He's fit very well into the system, and he's actually made K'Andre Miller a better defenseman. Essentially what Jacob Trouba was supposed to do is what Will Borgen is doing. So yeah, I'd extend them about that same price range. It might have to be a little bit more considering when the cap is coming up, but around that price range, I think would be good enough. Also, kudos to Dave stealing my line about Bill Suspill.
What line did I steal?
One of the best follows online. I dropped that line.
How is that something that is stolen? It is an absolute fact. Bill to Spill
is a fact.
Phenomenal follow.
But in relative to this podcast, I say, anyways, I'm sorry. I'm just
all right.
But yeah.
Anyway, Borgen 1,000% extend. Just the impact he's had on K'Andre Miller alone. He's only 28. He's not going to be that expensive. And I'm not sure how many of you guys listening now have heard the news. Escrow payments have been canceled by the league, meaning that the players are no longer throwing in money as insurance to the owners, that the owners are going to get a 50-50 split. Now it's swung the other way where the players are going to see a huge cap increase because the players are not going to get a 50-50 split. So we're probably looking at a $96 million cap ceiling next year.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, and it's also, I think what JL said, it just rings so true to me. It's fit, right? And there's so much here where the Rangers have let defensemen walk who were very good fits, right? Anton Strawman at one example,
Oh,
right there. Just
God.
their inability to recognize that and properly evaluate it, right? Self-scouting their own defensemen, right? Prioritizing Stahl and Girardi over Strawman, right? We've done that song and dance way too many times. Don't do it again. Just bring back the guy who has been rock solid for you. This is an easy call now. And look, I know the 11 game, however long the sample is now, he's played 16 games as a Ranger. It's not a huge sample, but I think that's enough for me to say, okay, like it's the right type of move. Like, and also again, if he is such a desired asset on the market, then that tells you something, right? He is a, sizable right shot defenseman that can skate. Like those don't grow on trees. Keep them.
Not just skate. He addressed a big issue that the Rangers had, and Hope put it in the chat for us from Corey Schneider's All Three Zones project, which is manually tracking all these micro stats. He is phenomenal at getting out of the defensive zone.
Yes.
It's one of the things he does extremely well, and he's the only Ranger that does it well. It was all we could talk about last year during the playoffs was the Rangers couldn't get out of their own damn zone. Guess what
Yep.
Borgen does? Gets out of the damn zone.
Yep.
Keep him.
And also, as Marlowe said on the wire, price. Did Marlowe say it? I think Marlowe did say it. Price of the brick is going up.
Yep. For sure.
All right. I need to watch The Wire. All right.
It's a really good show, Dave.
Incredible
You should,
show.
Yeah.
Get on it.
All right. On to the next Gerard Gallant slander account at Alant Anderson. Bluesky.social. I'm assuming I mispronounced the first half of it, but that's what happens when you have most of Gallant's last name in your handle. Now that Igor is extended 8 years with the full no move, what is Dylan Garand's future with the Rangers? Do you view him as a long-term backup, short-term backup, or trade token? I'll go first. It's the last two. He will be a short-term backup when Jonathan Quick retires. Assuming he does well in that limited role, he will be the next Cam Talbot and Antti Raanta and Alex Georgiev, where he will be traded for draft picks at some point in the next 3 years.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. No need to expand.
Yeah, same. He's going to fall in the line of other goaltenders like Marty Biron, Chad Johnson, Mackenzie Skapsky, Cam Talbot, Antti Raanta.
Oh, God, Skapsky.
Basically, any backup that played with Lundqvist, they were gone. But we love him. Oh, Andrei Pavlik. There you go. Good player. Going to be the backup. He'll get traded in a few years. Wash, rinse, repeat.
All right, on to the next one. Dan at danielpasses.bluesky.social. How optimistic have the last 10 games made you? And then in parentheses, it's nice to see actual hockey being played as opposed to whatever the hell they were playing at the end of November through December. That is a tough question. How optimistic are we after the last 10 games?
I mean, I'll say like pretty optimistic. And that's only because, and I was thinking about, framing it this way before we jumped on to record here. If you're one of the teams ahead of the Rangers in the standings, you're probably looking behind you and saying, oh shit, I hope the Rangers don't get it together. And I remember feeling that way last year, actually, about the Devils. Now, obviously the Devils never got it together. Their defense and goaltending were such a mess that they just never got into the race. I also kind of felt that way about Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh's always a tough out in the playoffs. As we learned, even the Rangers a few years ago as the higher seed needed the full 7 games. Pittsburgh outplayed them most of that series. The Rangers definitely got a little bit of fortunate luck with the Louis Domingue thing, although they did play better in the back half of that series and earn the win. I think the Rangers are that team this year. I think if you're in a current playoff spot, your thought is, especially if you're like the Caps, right? You're having this great year. You're an inexperienced team though, and you're probably like, who's the one team we could face in the first round, like in that bottom pack of teams that could knock us out early? And I think they probably think it's the Rangers. The Rangers swept them last year. Highly experienced team, great goaltender, great top end of the roster in terms of talent. So I'm pretty optimistic. I think if they get in, they're absolutely capable of going on a run.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So pretty optimistic.
So here, the way the standings are right now, Washington has a 7-point lead on the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. let's just say the Rangers would get the second wild card. The Rangers can absolutely beat the Caps in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Then they'd have the
No
winner
doubt.
of Carolina, Jersey, which that's going to be a tough series. Washington's going to be a tough series too, but I still think Carolina and the Devils are both better than Washington. And then it's whomever comes out of the Atlantic. Like the Rangers, if they're in, they can make some noise.
Oh yeah, no, I am stupid optimistic. I never stop believing in these guys. Um, I think they're going to squeak in, and I think they'll do some damage. The only thing I just hope, if the Rangers make the playoffs, is that somebody eliminates Florida, because for some reason that seems to be the kryptonite. You know, it's like have
Well,
like a
they're
very
the-
20.
Disagree.
best team.
Hard disagree. Hard disagree. Go through them, beat them at their own game. Go through them. The Red Sox had
Okay.
to do it.
The way they're playing the last few games is more committed to like an identity and a defensive style than they ever played last year. Remember last year they were a good team, but it got easy for them. Like everything clicked. Offensively, they were great. Shesterkin and Quick was especially incredible the first half of the year. Like, look, they had a magical season last year. Everything broke their way until the Florida series. They didn't have to go through. This team's gone through adversity. They've had to change their style in order to get out of the hole. That makes them dangerous, especially against Florida. So I do agree with you, Dave. Like, look, if they were to go through 2 tough rounds and had to face the Panthers again, why would they be afraid? They would have nothing to be afraid of. They've proved everything to themselves if they make it to that point, and they could definitely beat that team. It's also
That's fair.
really hard to.
I
It's
could-
also really hard to repeat in the NHL. It almost never happens. I mean, I know Tampa did it, but it's very rare.
That's fair. I can be on board with that. Definitely.
All right. So 2 more questions, and then there's a quick update on the JT Miller stuff. Which one do you want to do first?
Let's do the questions. Let's save the update because now I'm intrigued. But let's save it for the end.
All right. So again from Dan, Daniel passes bluesky.social. Bluesky.social. Wow, I sound like
You
I got
probably
a
just say
lisp
the
when I
first
say
part of
that.
the handle too. The whole
Yeah.
Sky circle thing. Yeah.
All right,
So
thank
go
you.
ahead.
Thank you. I now have permission to be lazy. I like it. All right. Thoughts on Arthur Kaliev's start with the team? I love it.
Solid. Yes, really solid. I wish he was a little bit better of a skater, but hopefully that's just him rounding into form. I know that was definitely never his forte. He's just a bigger dude, so he's more like he's actually reminds me of like he's basically like Vladimir Tarasenko light. I mean, he doesn't have the moves, but it's a very similar style, right? I'll shoot from anywhere, big body, gets in the way. And I mean, he should have had 2 goals against Ottawa. Obviously, the second one was called off on a very marginal challenge. But that was a rip. I know it was deflected, but that thing was an absolute bullet to the far post. The goalie had no chance on either shot. So get that dude a couple shots a game. He's probably going to score. He has a lethal shot. Reminds me a lot of Tarasenko.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed just what he's been able to bring on that line with Hedel and Kreider. Yeah, even from my seat, I thought that was an absolute, and it was kind of like it was kind of like off of like a rebound, or it was just kind of like an odd angle, but he ripped it and it went off of the goalie's arm and it went in, but you could tell it was a heavy shot, you know, and you can see it, you know, when he shoots the puck, there's a little extra to it. So, you know, you mentioned the skating. I didn't think he looked too bad. You could tell he's trying to still fit in, but he didn't look terrible with those 2, Kreider and Hedel. So, you know, just continuing with that. I mean, he just needs to shoot it more. But yeah, dude's got a missile. I think he's looked great.
So Kaliev brings something that the Rangers don't have, which is I'm just going to shoot the puck. I don't care where I am. And they needed that so badly. The other thing, Rob, you said that his skating isn't the greatest, and it isn't, but he makes up for it with just getting to open space. He has very good situational awareness on the ice. And if you don't see it with the Rangers, go back to some of his highlight reels with the Kings and watch his goal. Watch where he puts himself before he gets the puck on net. It's always, he's got time, he's got the puck on his stick, and he's got a fast release. He knows where to be and he knows where he's putting the puck. And that makes up for skating. Like we always focus on skating.
100%.
You can make up for bad skating with the skill set Kaliev has. All right,
Nice.
last question from Brian with a Y, but Y is spelled out W-H-Y, which is, I like that. I like the dad joke. At Simple Hockey Fan. Is there an out-of-nowhere trade you can see happening? This is tough.
Ooh, that is a
I don't
good
have
one.
enough. I don't have enough of a thought here. I don't know. I honestly don't see one. I don't have any good ideas. Let me say that. I'll let you guys take this one.
I don't know. That is a tough one because it kind of reminds me of when everybody thought I think the Rangers were going to get. I forget who the target was as a deadline. Dave, you could probably have a better idea at this, but it was the year that they traded for Vetrano and Kopp. I don't think those two guys were on anybody's radar at the time. Certainly, I didn't think that they were going to be.
Kopp was,
Rangers at the
Vetrano
time.
definitely not. And I remember Drury got him very early. Like that was well before the deadline, and it was very surprising. So yeah, Vetrano definitely fits the bill.
Yeah, so I wouldn't. It would have to be a defenseman. That's probably the most I'll be able to say is that if anything, it'll be a defenseman that we probably didn't expect, or maybe I don't want to say Jake Wallman, but it's probably a similar style defenseman like that. And that's honestly if they even trade for Miller with the projected deal it's currently looked at. Oh gosh, see my brain's not working. If they trade Miller for Hedel and Lindgren and a bunch of other players, then they're probably going to have to get someone to fill that spot, or they just throw Zach Jones in there. But I think that surprise trade is going to be a defenseman. But I can't tell you who.
Oh, I can tell you who.
You're going to say Brian Dumoulin, aren't you?
Or Thomas
No.
Chabot.
No. Roman Yossi.
What? Oh,
that would be pretty dope.
that would be.
I'd be pretty happy with that.
This is not a trade deadline deal.
Clearly.
Nashville is horrible. Absolutely horrible. They need to get younger. They need to get faster. They need to do a lot of things that they don't have right now. I mean, this team is what? Yossi, Forsberg, and that's it.
Steven Stamkos.
And it was is Stamkos even doing anything there?
No, he's really not.
No.
Yeah. 16, 14, 30, and 45 games is not terrible. Marchessault's there, but this is a team that, Forsberg is 30, Stamkos 34, Marchessault 34, Ryan O'Reilly 33, Tommy Novak is good, 27, Gustav Nyquist 35. This team needs to get younger. And Roman Yossi is 34. He's going to be 35 in June. He is still a top defenseman in the league. 8, 24, 32, and 41 games. I'm ignoring the minus 18 because Nashville sucks. Playing 25 minutes a night. Yossi is the guy that brings back a Hall. That's somebody that brings back Hedel. That's somebody that brings back Othman. A first-round pick, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's somebody I am perfectly okay with getting and sacrificing Hedel and Othman for.
That's really interesting.
And now I'm not saying this is going to happen. This is just an out of nowhere.
That is out of nowhere. No, that fits the bill for the question. I mean, you play him with Fox and then you just go like the two of the most elite offensive defensemen on one pair, or are you splitting that up? I mean, it probably makes sense to play them together, right? And keep the other pairs as is.
I would play them together but obviously we have to see what the rest of the defense looks like. If they keep Vakanainen and Borgen, then yeah, you do Yossi, Fox, and God, that pairing would absolutely destroy everybody.
Love where your head's at here, Dave.
Yeah, seriously.
That's the first time I've had unanimous approval of what's going on in my mind, so I appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
What a great idea.
All right, so the Miller update is from a Canucks fan on Twitter at Taj1944. He does a lot of what Phil Kotcher does and what Davey Upper does in transcribing a lot of these interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, with the news that the Rangers and Miller are back on the table, I think the Rangers are trying to figure out what the absolute cheapest offer the Canucks would take for Miller. So obviously that's what anybody is going to try to do in a trade scenario, but I'm reading that as Miller has said Rangers are nobody, which means Carolina and the Devils are off the table. I'm reading it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tyler in the chat put Noah Laba is going to be included, and I slapped him.
Okay,
If it's the absolute cheapest, then you're doing what? Heedle's not in the package anymore if it's the absolute cheapest that they take.
Well, I would assume Lindgren would still be a part of it.
Right. I think
Yeah,
you're still doing
Lindgren's
Lindgren.
fine.
Right. And you're probably doing like maybe one more forward, like a Rempe or an Edstrom, right?
Yep. You do one of Rempe or Edstrom. You do two of Sikora, Yaroslav, last name I can't pronounce, Bo
Gruel.
whatever.
He's not even
Gruel.
really a prospect, Gruel. I'd almost say like
He's not a prospect, but yeah, he's a body.
Yeah.
And
I'd
then
almost
the
be
first
fine
round
including, right. I'd be fine including Othman. Maybe it's an Othman and Lindgren and then the Cora first round pick, something like that.
Yeah,
that
I'd be on board with that.
I'd include Othman only because I don't believe Othman is going to be as good as people think he is. But
I think his stock is sinking already. I mean, he has not had a good year.
Well, he was also injured too. He was injured.
No, I understand that, but a lot of his production was even on the last year was on the power play. Like I know Brett Berard was their best like even strength player last year in Hartford, and I think he probably is keeping that mantle up this year as well. So all I'm saying is like I know Othman gets hype, but I think long term I'm probably keeping Berard over Othman if I had to make a choice.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely don't disagree with that. If we're talking cheap as possible, then we're probably also looking at guys who are either a couple years away that are not like Perot, you know, and even the guy like I don't think Berard's going to be a part of it because it seems like the team values him. I don't think they really wanted to send him down. I guess maybe there's some aspects of his game they want him to work on because he did get a very extended look up here. So maybe Noah Laba, maybe Dylan Rubrek could also be an option if they're trying to go cheapest available. I would assume maybe Zach Jones possibly be a part of a deal if you know they're going to go out and trade for a defenseman at the deadline because that you gotta have an NHL player at least on there, you know. And I think Zach and you know I don't want to say Lindgren's not an NHL player, but I'm sure Vancouver can probably fill that other center spot and then probably bulk up on defense because they seem to be all like in a similar situation to the Rangers. So. Hey, listen, you want to pull it off and keep Filip Chytil and kind of deal with the ramifications afterwards with the cap going up, or maybe run with all four of those guys next year. I mean, somebody's got to go to the wing at some point if that's the case, because Carrick's still here, Trocheck, Chytil, and Zibanejad. Somebody's got to go to the wing, or unless you end up trading one of those guys for something else. But you know, it'd be interesting to see them pull that trade off without having to include Chytil.
For sure.
Yep.
All right, guys, this was a lot of fun.
It's fun when the Rangers are winning to talk about them.
Yeah, no kidding.
The fans are asking more questions. It's all good stuff.
Blog traffic is like tripled.
Yeah, great.
I love it.
That's the edict here to the Rangers. Keep winning. Flyers on tap. Colorado over the weekend, Carolina coming in. So more huge games, more to talk about next week. We'll be with you guys through it all and keep listening. We'll see you next week.